Hi guys, welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. In today's video, we are going to be doing another FMV review. Today's video, Who Pressed Mute on Uncle Marcus? Now this video will contain spoilers, so if you plan to play the game first, I potentially recommend that you go away and play it, and then come back to this, and then you can hear all of our thoughts on this game. Jack, so we played this game just over a month ago now, I reckon. Certainly memorable, wasn't it? But maybe not for the better reasons that you would hope, right? Now, we've played a lot of FMVs. Does this game rank bottom?
I've not quite made my mind up on that yet. Because let's face it, we're comparing it against Dr. Decker, and or at least in my eyes, I'm comparing it against Dr. Decker. Whereas I found Dr. Decker long and boring, this one was shorter and boring, but the characters were also not as nice to play with. So it's a tough toss-up. It could be joint bottom, to be honest with you, which is such a shame because the premise itself, it at least caught my eyes. It's a murder mystery. You're doing it via a quiz, so they're two things that I really enjoy whacked together. I thought it was a winning formula for me. Oh my god, like you say, when we played it about a month ago, I just thought it was an absolute car crash, lad.
It was pretty bad because, like, I remember my audio was messing up, so I bounced out, and you were like, "It's probably not a bad thing. You've got away scot-free here." And I looked at it, and yeah, I mean, the characters, like, despicable, intolerable. The story, like, and the mystery element really rushed and pretty difficult to get first try anyway, or like, at least without a guide handy in my eyes. But yeah, like, not a pleasant experience. And when we are comparing it to, say, like, your late shifts, your Ericas, it just doesn't land. Now, we obviously pretty quickly gathered this is a COVID product. You used to get a lot of like especially like horror films and stuff that used to be done, you know, via webcam, because I don't know, this is what I mean my family were doing anyway, where we used to do weekly quizzes where we would take turns at someone being the quiz master. So it was kind of reminiscent for that, but I was with you. I'm like, yeah, this could be a winning formula here, kind of like a quiz, but a bit of a mystery in where you interview one person at a time. But before we get into the characters, lad, I just think we should talk about the whole mystery element, mate. I would say that it's just very rushed. You get about, 4 or 5 quiz rounds where you have to ask questions, and you pretty much have to guess who to go for and extract information out of them with the correct dialogues. It's very much guesswork, I think, because I think early doors we picked Toby, but because his signal was breaking up, we basically didn't find anything out from him, right? So we basically missed a complete round. So on our first playthrough, we didn't really get anywhere, did we? Because we missed a trick. I wouldn't say that's exactly ideal, while, like we mentioned, Dr. Decker, opposite game where we've got almost too much time to ask them questions, where we can tread a lot of similar ground. This is the opposite, where it's like blink and you miss it, and I really think it missed a trick.
Yeah, because let's face it, that's what this game is built around. So, for those who haven't played it, it's essentially someone has poisoned Uncle Marcus, and it's this really annoying family, but like you say, we'll get into the characters in a bit. And one of them has done it, and your objective is to find the proof, find the killer, and I think there was something else, like find the motive, or it was something like that. There was 3 objectives, and you have to use this quiz as like a way to talk to people and find stuff out. But yeah, like, besides the characters, one of the absolute worst flaws of this game is that there's no rationale behind the choices. So like, we finished our first playthrough, and I swear we only found like 1 or 2 bits of evidence across all the characters throughout the game. And even going back and replaying it, there's no real rationale. And I've seen this online, a lot of people do agree with us in that sense, lad, that you're just picking random points of dialogue. And sometimes it could be that you're slagging someone off, but then they actually then reveal a bit of information to you, and you think, that doesn't make sense. Like, you'd think, if anything, you being nice to them would somehow get you that bit of dialogue. So I feel like the game was built this way. I don't think you can get it done in one run, but I don't think it was intended for you to get it done in one run. I almost expect them to want you to play it over and over and over again, collect evidence along the way, and then see who you could accuse at the very end. So I don't know, for me it didn't really work. I mean, you talk about replayability. By the time you've seen that scene, you know, where like the mum is going, oh la 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 la, she's doing all like her classic
Yes.
stuff, it just gets on your tits. Like the number of times that you have to go through that, it's just, you know, mind numbing. And you know what, while we're on the subject of replayability, I will say one of the positives is that you can skip scenes, but one of the negatives with it is that for some reason there are certain scenes that it says that you should be able to skip, but you just flat out can't. So there is a little bit of inconsistency with the skipping thing there. And I feel like this is perhaps the area where it one-ups Dr. Decker, because you can go and skip stuff, and obviously it's not as long, so that's where my sort of dilemma is in picking between the two. But certainly, yeah, you know, as a choice-based game, there's nothing really behind it. It's not really well thought or mapped out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest flaws, that if you are doing a murder mystery, you need ample time to flesh out, you know, the questions and the rounds to gather evidence. This is like, it's an hour long, isn't it? We completed the game in an hour, and then we did a second playthrough, which we cut short and did like 45 minutes because, yeah, we wanted just to test the waters with a certain choice, which ended the game prematurely. But I think while with like Dr. Decker, it almost gives you too much time, where like there's just a lot of like answering, and then Shapeshifting Detective, where there's just a lot of empty rooms and you're treading ground, and it doesn't really tell you how, you know, you can move on pretty much. This game does the opposite, where it very much gives you like, it's essentially 4 quiz rounds, job done. And I really don't think that you can, get it. Like you say, I do think it is intended to be done in multiple playthroughs, because it's so unrealistic to do it in one. But I just wasn't a fan of the fact that it was flying guesswork, really. It pretty much paints everyone as a potential suspect. Everyone's got roughly the same alibi. Everyone roughly used a potential weapon to poison the uncle. And there's almost like no narrowing it down, unless I imagine you do a load of like, you know, guesswork and repeat playthroughs. So yeah, I just wasn't a fan of that element.
No, and you know what? Another thing that I wasn't necessarily a fan of in this game, it's almost as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. When you first boot up the game, there's almost like this sinister music, and it tells you about the themes that this game is going to cover. The menu then comes on, and it's like this sort of really jovial, happy music. And there are points in the game where you think like, okay, they are playing it for laughs. But as I'll get into, like when we go into the ending, there's some like kind of low-key heavy stuff in here. And I'm like, damn, like they're really going to try and play this off like in a very light-hearted sort of way, given the fact that they're a family as well. So there was a little bit of a weird confusion in that sense as well, Tony.
No, I completely agree. Lads, shall we talk about the characters? Like, I don't particularly want to, but we're going to have to.
Yeah. So look, like straight off the bat, so you've got this family. You're playing as a girl called Abby, and she's trying to work out, you know, obviously who poisoned Uncle Marcus. So they're the first 2 characters you're introduced to. Other characters include Auntie June, Toby, Bradley, Lottie, the mum, and the nan. Now, for me, across the entire game, only Abby, Uncle Marcus, and Nan were the somewhat likeable characters. Everybody else was just annoying as hell. You've got Auntie June, who's like this drunken mess, very outspoken and just plainly rude, really. The mum's very self-absorbed, and sort of like has her own very interests that she really wants to push on everyone. Toby, he's like this sort of your typical, I don't know what the word is for it, but again, he almost comes across as that very self-absorbed and very righteous, and like he has like this sort of moral superiority complex because he's banging on about climate change and stuff like that, which again just doesn't translate very well. Interestingly enough, mentioning Toby, he is the guy who's in the complex as well, so those of you that play these games will recognise him. Bradley, he's all like the dark soul. He's like into murder and horror, and You know, he collects poisons and stuff like that. He's a little bit of a recluse. And then there's Lottie. She's like the typical like Instagram model that sort of is all very like vain and image, and again not very likable. So it was hard to really get on with anyone in this game besides the guy that's going to end up dead, Abby, who you're playing as, and the Nan.
No, I do agree, and I fully agree with your opinions. There's only sort of 3 likable characters, and you know what? It is a miracle that Abby has turned out well adjusted as she is with this absolute toxic, horrible family. She's like the only one who's sort of self-aware and kind of, you know, has generosity and any sort of good traits really. And it's a miracle that a lot, like, you know, the 2 toxic parents, like the mum and the auntie, have spawned these like horrible kids. And like, you know, the Nan seems completely nice. It just seems like there's these bad eggs just in the middle of the family tree, and then it goes back to nice again. It is really weird. And yeah, so like we've got Reese who comes back, or like Reese from, you know, like the complex, who's now Toby. And I knew him, and I also knew Uncle Marcus. If anyone, you know, is a fan of The American Office, he plays the CEO, David Wallace. Now, those are the only 2 I know. Their acting performances, like I would say, you know, Toby, Reese in the complex did a solid shift. You know, I really quite, you know, his character was pretty decent. He had quite a good on-screen presence. And I know the guy who played Uncle Marcus can act. He can act very well, in fact. The performances in this game leave a lot to be desired, and I think in their defense, because we know these guys can act, I feel that maybe the script doesn't allow them to. Maybe it's the fact it's just an hour long. But for a lot of the other characters, I think if they're going to be completely just bad and toxic caricature people, I don't know if they need some form of depth or kind of like, you know, good parts to them to make it work. But the script was just so vile that I think these guys were potentially told by, like, you know, their superiors or like the directors who had the vision for this game, we want you to be caricatures of these certain characters. So like, we want someone who's going to be the most just egotistical Instagram influencer who makes the quiz about herself. We're going to have someone who's going to be a dark soul who's got, yeah, like a weapon, and he's literally going to dress up in a black hoodie like he's a school shooter. The characters just completely like horrible, and I feel for you because you're the one who had to replay the game. It's just a really horrible experience. That like, I get what they were going for. They were going for these really horrible caricature-esque people, but in doing so, it is a trudge to get through, and it just doesn't make sense that Abigail would be a product of this family.
No, I mean, you said it right there, that they're caricatures, aren't they? Whether that was intentional, I'm guessing it probably was, because you are ultimately accusing one of these people as being a murderer, so you sort of maybe want to make that a little bit easier on yourself. But just as a, like, yeah, as a playing experience, it was so tough to listen to these conversations that you really just wanted to move things along to see what you could do in terms of, you know, finding evidence and stuff like that. Obviously, we've been very negative so far in this video. I wanted to throw it over to you, lad. Is there anything positive that you could have that you could salvage from this game?
The one acting performance I enjoyed was Abigail, and I think that's quite a difficult task. I always say on this channel, I think it's difficult to be a main character and perform, because I think main characters have to be a blank canvas to accommodate the player choices. I think Abigail does a solid job. You know, she was likable, you know, and she did a good job of almost acting hurt by all these comments. And I felt sympathy for Abby. I really did. So that's a positive, I have to say. Otherwise, mate, I really can't. The game has just way more cons than pros, doesn't it? Like, even the fact that I was like, hey, if the characters are not enjoyable, well, at least I can sit through and enjoy a quiz, because, you know, I quite like a quiz. But none of the questions were like, none of it was actually a quiz. Toby doesn't even ask questions. He does some kind of ethical thing, trying to make us like feel sympathy for people who have it worse. Lottie, the influencer, it was all about herself, and we don't know her. We don't know how many followers she has or what her best feature is. And then, yeah, like, you know, like the mum who's just obsessed with singing and projecting her musical talent, you know, if you can call it that. it's just throwing like classical music stuff. So like, yeah, it was painful, and I think we demonstrated that with the pain in our voices on the stream, and I think the chat reflected that as well. So the only thing I can really say was Abby's performance and the fact that it was only an hour long, which, you know, put us out of misery all the more sooner.
Yeah, I to be honest, I mean, you did one better than me. Maybe I could say that the fact that you could skip through the game more quickly is a positive, but I feel like that's a backhanded compliment, if anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I did want to quickly talk about the evidence menu. So basically, you can pause the game at certain points when you find a bit of evidence, and you can then see, according to which character, the bit of evidence that you just found. Again, on the inconsistent side, because what I've found now that I've 100%ed it is that certain characters you only had to find 2 pieces of evidence before you could accuse them of it, and that in that case you'd have to play to the end of the game and accuse them. You couldn't accuse more than one person in the same playthrough, whereas other characters required like 5 or 6 pieces of evidence, which was fine. Say it was fine. Like, it was a little bit of a slog in that sense, and I think it was the Auntie June character where you had to find the most. So yeah, even on that sense as well, I feel like I'm bashing this like the whole video, but it just does deserve it. Like, I don't think that there is much that you can particularly salvage from this as like a really enjoyable experience. So if there are people out there that like this game, do try and convince us in the comments, because it's a tall order to try and find something. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, lad, before we got into the endings?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted us to go to choices, really, because like we very much like did one run, didn't gather all that much. It's quite difficult to, as we mentioned. And then, it came to the choice at the end where it threw a poison at us, and we didn't gather enough that we had to guess a poison. And you, 1 in 3 chance, just guessed it completely right. So yeah. Uncle Marcus lived, but we had to, I can't remember how it ended from there, if we had to accuse someone. And then on our second run, we did it again. But we just decided to ignore Uncle Marcus, which ends the game prematurely, and then we kind of called it there. I haven't seen all that much from it, so my questions to you really were, how is the branching, did you do any subsequent playthroughs where you were able to find the killer? And, do you know who the actual killer is, mate?
I do know who the killer is, and there is only one killer. So it's not like that the game rotates and you can get multiple killers like you can in, like, Dr. Decker or Shapeshifting Detective, for instance. As far as the branching goes, it's very odd because sometimes the questions in the quiz change depending on who you pick first, which is a little bit odd. And I'm going to say right off the bat, to get this 100%, there was no way that I was just going to sit through and just pick, all the different options. I went and I found like a complete walkthrough of how to get the 100% for this one. So thank you to anyone out there that's went and done that, because that really was handy. So yeah, the choices themselves aren't particularly important. Obviously, there's going to be ones where you're answering to the quiz, and that might get a little bit of dialogue for evidence. Again, as we said already, though, that there's no real rationale to that. But I think the main choices in this are, do you trust Uncle Marcus or not? Because obviously if you don't, he then dies. And then in terms of the accusation of who the killer is. So I wanted to ask you, lad, who do you think the killer is out of all of them?
Well, on our playthrough, we found a pretty hard evidence on Toby, who was sat in a bathroom stall muttering to himself, "You can do this, you can do this." So based off of that, I was kind of leaning to him. You sort of was sus on the mother, and I felt there were grounds there. There's also the Nan, though, and I feel like there's just something fishy about the fact that she is the one likable character that you can quiz. So I developed a bit of a suspicion on her, but it's pretty difficult. The game does it in a way where, and to bring us back to the actual thing, is that 3 people pour drinks on him, 1 dabs him with a cloth, and I don't know if it was setting us up in a way where like it could change and all of them could potentially be a murderer, and it changes on different playthroughs like it was in Shapeshifting Detective. But from what I gather, there is just one killer, right?
There is, yeah.
So I think that's quite sloppy, that like it basically paints everyone up as a potential suspect until the very end where you have to get it right. But I don't know, like, to be honest, I might just say Toby, since we found pretty hard evidence against him at the end. But
Okay, so it wasn't Toby.
okay.
It wasn't Toby. What's your next name?
I'll say the Nan next.
It was the Nan, yeah. The Nan
Oh, it was
did
the Nan. Okay.
Yeah.
Does it explain like motive or anything?
It does. She gets the biggest ending. So right, this is a little bit of backstory. So the reason she did it, and this is her killing her own son, by the way, which is what I was mentioning, or trying to kill her own son, which is what I was saying at like the top of how like it's a very jovial, light-hearted game, but like this is literally like a mother poisoning her son. And the weird thing is, jumping forward a bit, is that Uncle Marcus just takes it in his stride. Like Abby then goes to him and says, "It was Nan," and he goes, "Oh, really? Like it was her. She tried to finish me off." And I'm like, "What?" Like there's, I don't know. It felt really odd. In terms of the rationale, basically, Marcus knew more about the death of his dad, or he kept sort of poking his nose around. And basically, what it was that Nan's husband was having an affair with a woman, and he was prepared to leave the Nan and obviously the family behind and take everything with him to be with this woman. So she murdered him to basically protect the family and, you know, keep all of the money and the house and all of that stuff. And she then put his body in the lake. But she told everybody else, "Oh yeah, you know, he went off somewhere, he went fishing and he presumably went missing and died." So that was basically that. And then you go and tell like Uncle Marcus, like I said, and then he's like, "Oh well, I get to move on from this." And it cuts to black and the credits roll. So it's yeah, I don't know. It wasn't, like you say, it was probably the thing of like she was the nicest character. They were trying to like flip the script a little bit and make it like, oh my god, it was the Nan. But I don't know. It again, like even when I saw it, I was like, it didn't really thrill me.
No, and you know, like you think that like if Uncle Marcus tasks you with finding the murderer, you think that would be some pretty solid information to give to the main character while she, you know, pursues it. But that's right, he's just going to leave that major thing out that he was poking his nose around, that she's a potential suspect in that element. But yeah, Jesus Christ. Yeah, this game completely flops for me. I do think it is the worst FMV we've played yet. Like, I didn't enjoy it. Like, the quiz element, the characters were just too unlikable. And I know that there's definitely an art and a beauty in going for evil characters. I'm more drawn to the darker characters, but these were done in such an inhumane way where they were all awful. The story, the choice branching just completely fell flat. That, yeah, there's just not a lot to ride home about this game. That I'm just glad you got it in a pack where there was other good FMVs with it, and you didn't, you know, spend a lot of money on this game.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. And tell a lie, there is a little bit more to that ending. So once you've told Uncle Marcus that it was Nan, you then jump back into the call with all the family members, and you basically just say F you to all of them. And you're sort of going to say, I'm going to forget the lot of you and go and make your own way in life. And then that's when the game ends.
Yeah, okay,
So like,
well that's
he
good.
does have that hurrah moment, you know.
Yeah, that's good. Very warranted, because yeah, Abby was like the only character that I actually liked in that game.
Yeah. Did you want me to quickly run through what happens when you accuse the others?
Yeah, go for it.
So Auntie June, she's just really drunk, you know, as usual, and she vomits. And she says, "Oh, I'm not surprised someone tried to kill Uncle Marcus, but it certainly wasn't me." And then she just goes on this like tangent of how she's really envious of Abby because she's young and she's still young enough to like not make the mistakes that she made, and that's why she hates Abby. And that's how that concludes. And then Abby's just like, "Oh, so you didn't do it?" And she's like, "No." And then that's that. Toby, he didn't kill Uncle Marcus. He lost 400 grand in some sort of investment, and he wouldn't have killed Uncle Marcus because he was his last hope to like get that money back. And then it turns out like his whole charade of like, you know, the thing of being in Africa or wherever he was for like some sort of like climate change thing, he actually wasn't. He was in the back of a van in London, and it was one massive setup. Bradley, the poisons went missing. This is like the wild one. So you accuse Bradley, he takes a gun and puts it to his head, and everyone's like, no, 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 don't do it. And then his mum, who obviously is Auntie June, then walks in and takes him by surprise. He then shoots, obviously shoots her dead, and you just see like blood splatter on his face. And then he decides to jump out the window and kill himself. So again, like, I'm coming back to that thing I said at the top. It was very jovial, the music, and you know what they were trying to do with the laughs and that. But there was some like quite, you know, there's got some heavy stuff in here as well.
Did he only have the one bullet? Why would he go out the window? What the fuck?
Yeah. Lottie, all that happens with her, she confesses to being a drug dealer, and then people come and knock on her door at the end to, like, you know, presumably because they're after her for some reason or another. And if you accuse the mum, she just said, oh, your dad hallucinated and you're going the same way as well, and she basically disowns you. So yeah, that's what happens with all of them as well.
Oh, great, lad. Well, you know, I think it's fair to say that I'm glad we've done this video. Now we never have to touch this family ever again.
I know, yeah. Just park it now.
Park it. Hopefully the next FMV's better. We'll be doing I Saw Black Clouds review in the future coming soon. Yeah. So hopefully that one fares a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. But look, you guys, like I said earlier, let us know what you think about Uncle Marcus. From what I've seen online, a lot of the same comments that we've said have been repeated. But who knows, we might find someone that really, really liked this game. So do disagree with us or agree with us in the comments below. Yeah, we grab everyone, guys. So yeah, be sure to let us know how you found this game. And like Jack mentioned, if someone does have a shed of light that we missed, I'd love to hear it. You know, because I generally an open mind. I'd love to be convinced if we missed a trick maybe, and maybe there is something good about this game. But regardless though, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and look through the channel. We're sure you'll find something you like. But until then, guys, we will see you in the next one. Catch you later.